Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Angie Dunn, and this is Dr. Steve Broughton. We're from Light Dental Studios, and we're starting a segment called Sound People. There's a lot of great stories of people and businesses that have grown in the South Puget Sound, and we wanted to share it with all of you. And so today we have Miss Erica Nist from the Seattle Tacoma Box Company joining us, and we want to hear a little bit about Seattle Tacoma Box Company and the history.
Well, I appreciate y'all having me on today. Seattle Tacoma Box Company is actually over 130 years old. It started back in Seattle right after the Great Seattle Fire. Actually, before they did the Denny regrade, it was situated about where the current Amazon sits. So it was Queen City Manufacturing originally, and then incorporated to be Seattle Box Company. And it lived in the tide flats of Seattle until about the 1970s, and they actually had a location down in Tacoma, and so they decided to consolidate the Tacoma location, the Seattle location, and they ended up in Kent, Washington. So they've been there since 1973, and over the course of history, they've done everything from wood crates to service in the oil fields to the corrugated, which is where they came and saw our corrugated plant, which is in Ording, and they also have a division that does plastic corrugated boxes. So it's kind of across the spectrum, packaging and applications like all throughout the centuries.
Yeah, that's it. We remember meeting you a couple of years ago, and I was just so taken back by the story of your company and the 6 generations. And I was thinking about that. I know that there was a study. I kind of repeat this to our company a lot. There's a study from J.P. Morgan that shows that after a year, 24% of businesses will fail. After 5 years, that drops up to, I think, 48%. And by year 10, 96% of businesses that started will fail. And then you take it to a company like yours that's multi-generational. And I was reading a study the other day in Business Week where they were showing that of family-owned businesses that survive a generation, to make it past the second generation, only 30% of those family-owned businesses survive. And then you go to like the 4th generation, and it drops to like 3%. Your company is going on its 6th generation. It's just a remarkable story. And I don't know if maybe you could just touch a little bit on a couple of things that you think have caused your business to survive when so many businesses fail.
I would say the number one thing is continuing to stay relevant. So obviously the company started back in 1889 where everything was made out of wood. And so as the centuries go, they end up making box springs, and then they would go, like I said, in the oil fields to help build supports, and they built a patent around that. And then corrugated became, and so they kind of stayed relevant in the times and had an imagination and an open perspective to not only stay within a perspective industry but also have diversity. And so that allowed us to continue to service our customers and continue to solve problems that they face, and it built these really long-term partnerships that we've had relationships with customers for like 3 generations.
Yeah, it was really cool to see the corrugated, because that was something that was new for you when we came and visited your plant, and you were showing how, because we don't think about that when we think about boxes. I mean, most people don't think about the evolution of boxes, and it was cool to see that you guys have this really cutting edge technology in doing corrugated boxes. So, and you were saying that you're in multiple states too. Can you talk a little bit about the operations today?
Yeah, so the operations, we have our corporate offices in Kent, like I talked about earlier, and then we have a warehouse location in Alaska and Oregon under Seattle Tacoma Box Company, and then Sika Packaging is another division of the company, and there's 2 locations in California and 1 in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And then we have our plastics corrugated plant, which has its manufacturing location in Arizona.
The company, being 130 years old, has also been through a lot of other crazy things, the Depression, World War I, World War II. How has that been? I mean, especially with COVID.
In terms of COVID, we were very fortunate of a lot of companies because we service predominantly the food industry. And so people have to eat even despite a pandemic. And obviously the grocery stores were a bit of chaos. So we actually continued. We didn't have to really take back anything in our company, and we continued to roll somewhat as normal. Obviously we had precautions that got put in place and remote working and things of that nature, but we're really, really fortunate, and as my grandpa would say, the ability for us to be nimble, and that really helped us. I mean, like you said, we have pictures of workers from World War II, and it's really cool to like look back and see those pictures and just how the lessons learned in the past can also apply to the current situation. I would say grit would be a really good description of that. There's,
Angela Duckworth.
I was just going to say the Angela Duckworth book. I'm a huge fan of that book.
I'm almost done with it. I'm reading it right now.
Incredible.
Yes.
But how she talks about passion and perseverance.
Yes.
And so the perseverance that sometimes you have to take that step of faith without knowing what the rest of the staircase.
Sure.
Yeah.
And like the Martin Luther King quote. But also like the passion behind it of you're working for something so much greater than yourself, especially when it's family dynamics. And because it's a long-standing company and it's a little more old school in terms of relationships, like they really encourage our sales reps, like anyone that works in the office, like they take them in the field so they understand what the customers go through. Farmers, fishermen, a lot of what we do has to do with Mother Nature. And so if you say, how many fish are going to be caught this year? And the customers are like, well, we think this many based on like a forecast, but I mean, they could have the biggest season of the year or they could barely get anything. And so the ability to be nimble, but also have that relationship with the customers, and that can continue and allow for us to best service them and build that relationship where they trust us to take care of them despite what Mother Nature may throw at them.
One of the things that's very much a buzzword in business today is culture. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the culture at Seattle Tacoma Box Company and what's important to you guys as an organization.
I would say family. That would be like the number one thing that comes to mind. Like obviously we're a family company. There's 8 of us within the family that work there. But also we were a really small company and we've grown a lot in the past years. And so it's really important to continue that open communication, the family dynamics, and making sure everyone feels a part of the team. I mean, my grandpa is the president of the company, but his door stays open for anyone in the office that wants to come in. And so that relational aspect, I think, is really, really important. And it's something we have to continue to work on because as you grow, the more people, the more communication that's needed. And so it's a constant effort.
Is there any kind of advice that you would say or give to companies that are multi-generational, and how do you get to 6 generations? Or
I would say, I mean, I originally didn't know if I wanted to go back into the family company. Obviously, it's something I had grown up with, my grandpa, my dad, but I originally thought I wanted to be a lawyer, actually. But when I was in school, like my dad they had an opportunity come up at work, and they were really, really great about, they want it to be our choice. They never wanted us to push in, and so I think that might be some advice is, it's the kids' choice and like what they're passionate about, and if you can find a niche within the company that fits within their strengths, that's a lot more desirable than to have to fit into a mold that like they put you in. So like majority of people in my family, they do sales and like more admin and operations, and I'm on the total opposite side of the spectrum in like sustainability and marketing and public relations and things and compliance and things of that nature. And so when I was in college, my dad was like, well, we have an opportunity for someone to do corporate compliance, which because we're a packaging company, we have to do like food safety certifications. And he said, and I was a political science major in like business law. And so he said, well, it really would fit in your scope of work. And I was like, okay, well, I have an internship with a lawyer over the summer. Like, I'm going to test that out first. And he goes, that's fine. Like, you just so you know, the option on the table, but like the sooner you can tell me the better, because if you don't want it, like, we'll find someone else that's qualified. I said, okay. So I went and did my internship, and I did it with the lawyer, and he sat me down, and he goes, in all honesty, he's like, you have a great opportunity that's right in your wheelhouse at your family company. Law school will always be there. You can test it out. If you don't like it, you can step out of it. But if you do like it, like, that's great. That's a great legacy to step into. And so that was really great advice that he gave me and that I think is beneficial, because then it really was my choice.
Any advice that you would give to someone that's watching that says, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life?
What am I going to do with my life?
I'm all potential. How do I figure out?
I read a really good quote once, and it talked about there's a things that you do for a living and there's things that you live for.
Yeah.
And so I think if you can figure out what you want to live for, and that can be like a greater, like I have a passion for people. Therefore, like a lot of what I do involves me interacting with people. And so I think if you can understand what your passion and what you want to live for, it can help you filter out some other career paths that might force you into something that you're doing just to go to work.
Yeah,
because
I really love that.
Yeah, and even like Steve Jobs, like they asked him, they're like, how do you work 80 hours a week? And he's like, I'm not actually working. and my grandpa's 83, and he'll say the exact same thing. He's like, it's not work. Like, I have so much passion for it, and I enjoy it. And so I would say kind of sit with yourself on those questions, and then also find an opportunity where there's growth. Because even if you're super passionate about something at first, if you have a glass ceiling that you hit, that's not very fun. And it doesn't continue to stimulate you and challenge you and allow you to continue to grow as a person and in your career. So, yeah, figure out what you live for is I would say step 1. And then 2, find an area and test stuff out too. Like, I tested out being a lawyer for 2 weeks, and I was like, you know what? Like, there's another option that I can take that I think would be more beneficial to me, but I still tested it. And so I think that's something that kids, younger generations, get scared of the failure aspect of it. But if you don't fail at something, you don't know a positive or negative. And the grit book even talks a lot about that.
Yes.
Of if you have a passion, explore it, then you can determine yes or no.
Yeah.
What are the ups and downs of working alongside family members?
It is a very interesting dynamic.
Okay.
But I think what's really fun about it is so my grandpa's 82.
Okay.
I said 83 earlier. He's 82. He'd be really mad at me if I said that wrong and didn't correct it. And then my brother, who's 23.
Yeah.
So you have a really wide spectrum of someone who grew up in the late 1930s to someone that was born 1997. And so within that dynamic, and I think it's a mutual respect too, of you approach it and like, okay, well, you have a perspective of being in the industry for 50 years and I have a perspective of being in the industry for 3 years. How do we collaborate on that? And so obviously there's a difference of opinions, different of approaches, but I think at least I'm really fortunate to be in an environment where there's respect of opinions and there's education on if we don't see a perspective because we haven't been in the industry super long, but also a respect on their end of, okay, these are fresh new eyes that are just like little sponges that are trying to absorb it. It was actually kind of funny because like I really didn't know anything. I just knew our family like owned a company. I didn't know what my dad did.
Yeah.
I didn't know my grandpa was the president. Like, they never used titles ever. So I just like, oh, my dad sells for the family. Like, that's really all I knew as a kid. It wasn't until like I got into the company and I was like, wow, like,
That's a big deal.
there's a lot of stuff like going on behind the scenes that I knew nothing about.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was kind of like, I feel like I was in like a middle ground almost of like, there's some that like are like multi-millionaire, and like ours isn't like that by any means, but it's like you're very well versed in like what the company is, whereas like I knew we made boxes. I knew if I went to Costco and there was a pretty box, like I could pick it up, and if it had ST at the bottom, it was us. Like that's pretty much as far as I knew. Or like sometimes we'd have to stop with my dad's customers and we took like farmers in like Middle Eastern Washington or wherever, and like I learned how to stack boxes and get like a penny box, like little stuff like that. Someone in the company once said, and it's like on one of our doors, and said, "Yesterday's methods on today's issues will put you out of business tomorrow." So like you have to have forward perspective. Apple boxes, cherry's a really big one in California. The plastics plant does a lot with like wet veg. Which is like anything that's hydro-cooled. So like corn, when you pick it from the field, you dump ice on it.
Okay.
So it used to be in a wax corrugated box, but corrugated and water, even with a wax barrier, like can only hold up for so long. And so plastic became the alternative to that. And then wax you can't recycle and plastic you can. And so that's been like a part of my sustainability role is dealing with the plastics plant and that.
Oh, that's neat.
Are you guys doing stuff in the fishing industry too? Alaska and crab and all that?
Yeah, we do a lot.
Because that's really popular too. So a lot of people buy crab and they want it overnighted from Alaska.
So we do like styrofoam for that, and we have like a hodgepodge, like I said, kind of a hodgepodge of other things. Like, yes, we make boxes, like that is like the heart and soul of a company, but there's a lot of other additives that we either warehouse or buy for customers, so it's consolidated and we can better service whatever they need.
I hope you all enjoyed that. We all learn from each other, and so that's just one of the remarkable. It's cool to hear the stories of people and how they make their way through life, and certainly Seattle Tacoma Box Company is a beautiful story, and so thank you for sharing it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, allowing me to share.
Thank you, everybody.
So I'd like to encourage you all, follow Seattle Tacoma Box Company on Facebook. They post a lot of really great stuff. And if you like this segment of Sound People, like, subscribe, share, and stay tuned for our next episode.